but usually it's when the play goes into rehearsal that we start getting serious about the prop lists. They increase, or they get more, or they change. You can start making things very early on, which is great, but of course they might be cut because people change their mind. And it comes as a list in various forms, and we just work through what we'll be actually doing personally on the show. The first one is the chair, which is the big Duke's throne, big Victorian desk chair, which is the fabric that was dyed for and that Melvin's working on.
I'm working on the throne for Measure for Measure. It's a fairly intricate piece of work. Has to be built fairly robust because it has 2 years worth of performances, really. The next stage for this chair will be to go into the paint shop, and then it'll come back in here to be finished off, to be upholstered, for the casters to go on, and then onto the stage.
It's all about pattern matching and getting it to be nice and taut. Tom chose the fabric. It's called a Walcott. And that's the original, a little bit of sample left, that's the original colour. He wanted it much more like the velvet that he's using in other props on the stage. It's like a whole scene with different amounts of green. So I have to dye it a little bit darker to bring up this velvet colour, which is quite difficult because velvet is a completely different fabric, but he's happy with the colour now.
Depending on the context, we find out first whether it is supposed to look new or not. If it's something like a newspaper that's been in somebody's pocket, then obviously you'll fold it up and rub it a bit with sandpaper, sometimes cheese graters we use to break things down. Something like an old deed, this is a new thing. We know that he's just acquired this. So this is going to look lovely and new and shiny. And things that look tatty to us now wouldn't have looked tatty at the time, of course, they'd have looked brand new. So there's a debate quite often as to whether we break it down or not.
This is a head that represents a prisoner in the play. There's several prisoners coming up through the traps. This particular one comes up to the shoulders, and the other actors in the play kick him. Therefore, this has to be a very sustainable prop. It takes a good bashing every show. We use original face casts from actors, which produce these plaster cast moulds. We put those together, and we pour in the latex and leave it for about 2.5 hours to produce a thick wall, which will help protect the foam inside that we put.
Every production sets new challenges for those behind the scenes. Anthony Ward's design for The Tempest includes a massive seashell and wings that span half the stage.
These are Ariel's wings. Because these wings are personal to this actor, the RSC have sent us the actor's measurement chart, which shows what his chest, his waist, his hips. It's the chart that the costume people use to make his clothing, and we're going to tailor a frame and a harness to hold him on these wings.
Well, the harpy is actually a character in the play performed by Ariel. Prospero asks Ariel to appear in order to frighten into madness the various lords who appear on the island. The point at which I became involved was about how to actually get into the wings and how to actually connect them with my body. And also, the main thing was that it was incredibly painful. It was a tiny little bicycle seat, one of those racing bicycle seats, and I could only last about 40 seconds without tears starting to come out my eyes. So I said something has to be done, so they padded it out and out, so it's now quite a bulky seat. Because one of the functions that the wings had to have was a mechanism to hide the harness, because for safety regulations I've got to be strapped in so that I don't break my neck.
Damn, come forth!
This is Caliban's shell. The actor will come up underneath the stage through a trapdoor and will appear through this little hole as though it's his house. We're making that in polystyrene which will be sheathed in fiberglass, and then we'll apply latex, shell textures and paint it to look exactly like that shell.
I must eat my dinner.
The shell was originally part of the set, the original design, and gradually, as we went on rehearsing it, we sort of decided that it would be a good idea if it was sort of Caliban's shell, or the place where Prospero kept Caliban as a sort of prison. So we sort of anticipate or imagine that, you know, you sort of chained down at night with these things within this shell, and it's, you know, it's something that would be found, you know, on a desert island. It's sort of strange being measured for your shell as opposed to being measured for a suit or something, but I got measured for a shell.
Even the floor of a set can throw up surprising problems. The RSC paint shop is responsible for the magical island in The Tempest.
In The Tempest, we have a circular area which is 8 metres in diameter. In the model, it's actually sand in a circular tray, if you like, and there's a pattern in it which is formed as if by a finger forming a swirl in the sand. That presented us with quite a few problems.
The main problem for us to work out is it's a pebble beach, and the brief was to find something that's actor-friendly, and that's fire-proofed, and that's durable.
Thy cigarettes, my mother, which thou takest from me!
When we first looked at it, we thought possibly real pebbles might be the answer, but there were a few problems arose when we thought of the pebbles. A, the weight of the pebbles themselves on a rather large scale like that would be very heavy for the substage of the floor. The other thing about pebbles is that they're very noisy, and I've got a few down here. You can see that they're quite noisy, so we decided that real pebbles were not such a good idea.
The texture had to be soft because actors were going to lie on it and they were going to walk on it in bare feet.
Well, it's great to work on because actually, I mean, it looks like sort of stone, but actually it's made of rubber. The trouble is when you do sort of leap about on it as much as I do, I mean, initially I did it in bare feet, but that was starting to sort of take the bottoms off my feet, and they were getting cut quite badly. So that was quite, it was quite painful initially. But we solved that by, you know, giving Caliban some sort of dodgy footwear.
We eventually discovered foam rubber pellets, which come absolutely in round circles and obviously not pebble shaped. So our next thought was to get them cut up into pebble shapes. There's no easy answer to that other than cutting them by hand. We stick down the foam pebbles with a glue, and then it gets covered over with a texture almost like cream cheese, fills in the bare gaps, and then after that it gets painted up to look like the pebble shapes.
It has grooves in it, which initially were quite hard to work with because it's a spongy material. You never really knew whether you'd lift your feet high enough to get over these ridges. But it's also something where the softness of the spongy quality allows people to roll on it, to be quite physical with it.
In the run-up to the first performance of Measure for Measure, the production departments begin to see the whole of the set coming together and see how the actors work with it.
We're at a stage where a lot of the design decisions will be made, but the anxiety now is whether you've made the right decisions.
One trick in Measure for Measure is to make an actor disappear through the floor.
We use as a means of communication, of being aware that people are below us, a number of devices, one of which are a dominant feature in this set are trapdoors.
In Measure for Measure, I play a character called Pompey. Now, Pompey is a difficult character to pin down. He's one of the low-life characters of the piece.
What mystery there might be in hanging?
He's given the chance to become a hangman, you know. And he goes, yeah, all right, I'll do that. And he asks the man who is the hangman, you know, so what's so special about hanging? And he says, well, it's a mystery. And he goes, what do you mean it's a mystery?
And the man magically makes a trapdoor open in the floor and Pompey disappears.
OK, take up your position then, Jimmy. Find your mark. Feet really close together. Slack out the chain.
The whole point about the trapdoor is the man surprises Pompey. He doesn't know he's standing on a trapdoor, so at one whisper from him, the floor opens, which gives Pompey a very big fright.
Focal point. Knees relaxed.
And after practicing this morning, I assure you it gives Jimmy Chisholm a very big fright as well. The director says, at this point, I think it'd be quite good if he falls through the floor. Yeah, that's all right in a cartoon, but in real life, it's very difficult to get a trap door, which is two doors which open downwards.
Because it's a person moving on it, it has to be totally safe. So we use pneumatics because they're a very reliable source of energy. It means that we can switch them in various ways. We have a completely lockable trap that even with no power supplied is safe.
I mean, you can't have a man underneath undoing a bolt, so it's quite an elaborate process for what sounds very easy. You know, and at this point you fall through the floor. Ha ha ha, good joke, but it's taking a lot of people a lot of time and effort, and it has to be safe. That's the other thing I have to do. I don't know how many performances of this play, but it'll be in excess of 100.
Three months after the model box presentation, the Measure for Measure set has reached the Royal Shakespeare Theatre stage, ready for the opening night.
The realisation of the set is a direct match from the model that we're all presented with at the beginning of rehearsal.
The beginning image is probably going to be the Duke sitting at an early phonograph. Projection of text, quotes from the Bible, recording his first speech. Large projection of his head. The Duke then disappears down this walkway through the auditorium. And then the door, hopefully, gets knocked down. And it's a bit like kind of a Victorian version of Mission Impossible.
This production of Measure for Measure has opened to strong reviews. It will play for 2 years in Stratford, Newcastle, Plymouth and London to over 150,000 people.